Hello, my name is Dan Hennen. Today is January 6th, 2023. I have run the Justice for David Crowley and Family page on Facebook, looking into the deaths of David, Comel, and Rania. I created that back on January 19th of 2015. In the sense, since then, the Apple Valley Police Department have ruled that David killed his wife and child, and then following lastly, himself. The page, which has grown to about 4,000 members as of today, did additional research on the case and pointed things out to authorities that were anomalies, pointed things out to the lead detective to make sure they looked into certain things that didn't make sense. A lot of anomalies in this case. And they did their conclusion and basically said that David did it. It's done deal. There's nothing more to look into. So there was concern, there was talk. Was there a police cover-up? Were they just inept? Were they incompetent? You know, what happened? What happened here? It shouldn't be taking a handful of armchair investigators solving a crime of this magnitude without anyone else looking into it. So a couple years later, 2019, I hired a private investigator to look into the David Crowley case. And I had a couple of criteria in mind when I wanted to do this. I had to be thinking when I did this that if the response came out that they agreed with us, that what's the response going to be? How are the public, how is the general public going to discredit us? So I couldn't get someone locally, someone that I knew, someone from my town, because if it came back and they said they agreed with us, they would just say, the doubters would say, well, you picked someone you knew, someone that you were connected to, obviously they're going to say that. So I needed to pick a non-biased person that was indeed a private investigator that I had no relationship with. And so I wanted to get also someone roughly my age, a father that had children and was looking into this and was not afraid to look into some with an open mind, some additional strange cases. So I landed on Kenneth Mains. I picked from Philadelphia, private investigator that specializes in cold cases. Now, the Crowley case isn't a cold case, but Mains was a guy featured on a couple television shows. He was that mid to high level profile. I didn't want to pick just a random Joe Schmo that no one ever heard of, because I would face backlash then as well by saying, well, you picked, who knows this guy? Who is this guy or gal? So I wanted to have someone that was in the public eye. And I also wanted not to say anything about the case. Of course, you don't want to bring up that there's a conspiracy. You don't want to bring up anything weird about it. And so I went to Kenneth Mains, and the other reason that I picked him, I selected him, was that on his resume were three well-known detectives, forensic pathologists that are well-known and that I personally like myself. Dr. Cyril Wecht, met him one time at a JFK conference down in Dallas. One of my all-time heroes, Dr. Cyril Wecht. Dr. Henry Lee is someone that I have a lot of faith in as well. I like the work that Dr. Henry Lee has done over the years. And Detective Joe Kenda from the television series, Joe Kenda. Well, Kenneth Mains knew all three of these and has gone to classes and courses and workshops and gotten certifications from these three. So it led me down the path to hone in on this guy that I had respect for. Now, I was going to hand him this case and hire him and not say much of anything. Keep it on the download, be very vague, be very generic, because I wanted to see also what is this guy's, how good, what's his worth in salt from his background. Is he really this good? Is he just an average guy? That was the other thing I wanted to get from it. It was somewhat a test. The Justice for David Crowley group pretty much by this time knew the answers and pretty much knew what happened in the case. Greg Fernandez, another person on a friend of mine, author of the book, was also on the page, was in the process of writing a book that came out in the year 2019. The Gray Stage, written by Greg Fernandez Jr. This was coming out in 29. I picked it up in 2020, read it, love it, because it's fact-based, it's facts. There's no opinions, there's no suggestions. A lot of times people look at us and our group as, and even Kenneth Mains did it on his video, basically says, you know what, I think there was a conspiracy here. Let's find and cherry pick the things that fit our narrative so we can get by with saying that. That is not the case. The only things we've brought forward and shown are facts. And so we thought the detectives in the case did a lousy job and didn't follow up on the leads and went so far in investigating some things but didn't go that extra mile. Kenneth Mains on his website was a guy that really says that he goes the extra mile. He's passionate, he's a high energy guy, and a very high level is what he expects from himself, and really pushes the envelope, goes that extra mile to be as good as he says. So when I gave him the case and hired him, he went through and read the case, the police notes, everything that was out in the open is what I gave him first. Now mind you, I'm waiting for this aha moment for him to write back. We never spoke. I never met him in person. It was just email only. I wanted to make sure I had a trail of correspondence that showed my correspondence with Kenneth Mains. I was waiting for this aha moment. Most people that read this report or delve into this case have 5 or 6 moments where they say, well, that doesn't make sense. How can that be? How can that even be true? How can that be right? Very few people look at it and close the book and say, yep, slam dunk. And typically those are non-critical thinkers. If you're a non-critical thinker, you'll read the police report. You'll say, yes, David did it, and done deal. But when you explore further and you explore the surroundings and you look at it from the totality of the event, you see many other things that are coming into play. And that's what I was hoping with Kenneth Mains, to hire him, is to overturn the other additional stones, to do the work that the detectives in Apple Valley didn't do, or chose not to do, or were told not to do. Things like that. And so he did a video, it came out, he published it on his website, on his YouTube channel. It came out December 30th. So Kenneth here has a video. It says, David Crowley, The Gray State, from the case files, a real cold case, detective's opinion. And Kenneth Mains gives his opinion on this case. This is not a cold case. It was an open and shut case. We're not looking officially, no one's out there looking for the real killers. It's only a small group of us armchair investigators that are doing so. But he is an expert in cold case. So he put this video together. It's an hour and 13 minutes long. It goes through why he thinks he came to his conclusion, which ultimately was the same as the police. He goes out of his way then also to say that he thought the detectives did a really good job. They were very thorough. It basically said the same things that we've been complaining about for the last 7 years. So here's Detective Kenneth L. Mains. You can go to his website. He's out there. He's out there as a public figure, and I wanted to get someone like that just to see what his thoughts were. And so he did this investigation. It came back and said, basically, I agree with it. David did it. You can look at the evidence, and it's a slam dunk. And to somewhat in a condescending tone was saying that people like us, the active group members of the Justice page, are kind of conspiracy theorists. We want to have things fall into how we think. We've got ourselves convinced of a certain resolution or response, and that's what we're going with, and we've got ourselves convinced, and we're not open to anything else. So very interesting, very interesting. So let's get back to the notes that I just wanted to do a response here because some of the things were taken, I think, out of context. So we gave him the case. I gave him the case. I didn't tell anyone else on our justice page who I hired. I didn't want to have any other bias. I did it solely by myself. I paid for it. I got him hired. I got it done. I got the conclusion. And then I made everything public. And I didn't agree with what we said, but it was very interesting nonetheless. So reading the police reports and the official narrative is one thing. And so I sent him all this, and then I sent back the next round to Kenneth Mains and says, here's anomalies that the police didn't talk about, but we brought them up to police. What do you think? And here's some things for me to take another step back and look at the total picture. Kenneth Mains talks in his video about looking at an investigative case from the totality of it. Not just what you see there, but the totality. And I wanted to get on that because that's something that we take pride in ourselves, and that's something that we feel Kenneth Mains fell short on. So, the big thing in this case, and I'll go through maybe, I've got 8 or 10 bullet points. For me, it's the Facebook posts. The Facebook posts that were on David Crowley's personal Facebook page that were deleted after the bodies were discovered. Deleted. Outright gone. After the bodies were discovered. So this is not a page, this is not a group, this was not his project Facebook page that other people had access to. This was his personal account. The post that was deleted by David Crowley, by whoever, obviously not David Crowley, but David Crowley wrote, I'm looking to hire and get a new group of surround myself with some trustworthy people to take this project forward. Now that to me is a huge point. Huge. Something that a detective would pick up on. Why is anything deleted from a Facebook page, a personal page? Mind you, police have this laptop and his cell phone on site. So who has access to anything that he's got? Who's logging into David Crowley's account to take this off? The post says, I'm looking forward to reforming my close group with some trustworthy individuals. Basically calling out the people he was working with as not trustworthy. To me, that's a red flag. I was waiting for Kenneth Mains to respond back right away and say, wow, that is messed up. That doesn't happen in a normal case. There's something goofy here. I never got the call. I never got the fact that he even found that strange. The Apple Valley Police Department has a new task force that was created, I think, just a month or two before this case came out, called the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit. A unit that all they do is electronic research and digging in to get the research. They're the ones looking at the cell phone, the hard drives. David had 15, 16 hard drives in his home. This was the group that had to go through the painstaking process of going through all the data. What was on the hard drive? What was on the laptops? And so when the case was done and they brought it to their conclusion, we as a group brought these things, this was one of them, to the police, lead detective. You find it odd that posts were deleted from his Facebook page. Not just any old posts, but posts leading to a crime, leading to something that's not going to jive or line up with the official narrative was deleted. David didn't like the group he was working with, so he's slowly pulling himself away. He wanted to get someone trustworthy as he's moving forward. So that's my first idea, a trustworthy team. He did not like those around him. Now, Kenneth Mains talks about David Crowley secluding himself, going into withdrawal, isolating himself, all these things, most of which were on the documentary that Eric Nelson produced. Eric Nelson's documentary film, A Gray State, is a propaganda piece. It's pushing It's cherry picking all the things that David did wrong, that made him look bad and shed him in a bad light, and put that out there to help the general public reaffirm the narrative that he did it. Not the case at all. We're still looking for a documentary to be made on this case, an authentic documentary, but that was certainly not the case. David was not isolating and feeling depressed and down and out about his financial banking situation and led to suicide. None of that was true. We exposed that. Our whole Facebook group justice page exposed that. David was on cloud nine. He was happy. So that was not the case. He did sign the movie deal. He was working with a lawyer and an attorney and an executive producer to move forward with this big deal that he had. He just needed to get these guys that were causing him problems out of his way to move forward. So he was happy. He was not in dire straits. He was not in financial straits. Someone in the case, a neighbor of one of the folks, Sean Wright, his name is, in the Gray State Project, a neighbor of his came forth and forward to our group anonymously at first and says, I talked to Sean Wright out in front of his house by the mailbox, and he asked me if I knew about this Crowley case. And he says it's real wild stuff, triple murder, he killed his family, 3 people dead, and it started showing me images on his phone of the crime scene. And she's like, wow, that's really nasty. Very graphic stuff, very graphic. And she said one of the images was a woman's hand laying on the living room floor by itself, or maybe it was even in the basement. I'm not sure where it was, but a woman's hand. Would have been Kamel's. It's the only woman in the case. Not the child. Kamel's hand laying there, basically chopped off, cut off, whatever. Keep in mind, of the crime scene photos, that photo doesn't exist. There is no photo of a woman's hand. We thought, after hearing this, that maybe the police didn't release that photo because of its gruesome nature. They are allowed to withhold some photos that are gruesome just for the general public. They said, no, there are some that we withheld, but nothing of that. We did not find. They confirmed they didn't find any additional body parts throughout the house. There was no body parts, other than the bodies that were there. Now, they blamed the dog on scavenging of eating some of the parts, but there never was a photo of a woman's hand. Now, doesn't that strike you odd that someone's smartphone has a photo of a woman's hand laying on the carpeting? The only thing I can deduce, and I'm not a detective, is that why does that photo exist? Why does that photo exist? Who took the photo? The only conclusion I can draw was someone at the crime scene took the photo and decided to save it and decided to share it. Like a trophy. Something you can share, something you can have that no one else has. We brought this to the attention of police as well, brought this to the attention of Kenneth Mains as well. Not interested. To me, that's a big point. A woman's hand, meaning someone was at the crime scene. Why would Sean Wright have a photo of a woman's hand, Kamel's hand? Remember, she was found with no hands. Neither hand was found for Kamel Crowley. Where were the hands? Well, they were cut off, sawed off, chopped off, whatever. And whatever sort of strange torture these people went through. Her hands weren't there. The dog did not eat the hands. They may have eaten some things, may have scavenged on some things, but not eat the hands. Now, police didn't find any body parts in the house. So how does this photo exist? Why was it there? Why was it there? Why was it taken? Who took the photo? And why on earth would you save something like that? Much less show someone. Those are the things that I'm waiting for the antenna to raise from these detectives to say, aha, that can't be true. Well, maybe it's not true. Maybe it's made up. I can't imagine this woman making up a story like that and then coming forth with the nightmares that it gave her by seeing this. These are the things, these are the stones that we want overturned in a case like this. We need people to investigate, to do a deep dive into a case like this. And say, if David did it, why would there be photos floating around of him cutting off the hands? Official narrative is that he shot them all point blank. That's it. We don't have a reason. Every case needs means, motive, and opportunity. Means and opportunity are there. There's no motive. Police did not come up with motive. Kenneth Mains did not come up with the motive. They took a stab in the dark thinking it was this, that, or the other thing that could have done it, but they didn't have an answer. You need to have a motive in any crime. Kenneth Mains knows this. The detectives knows this. The lead detective, Detective Gumbert, knows this, and the police chief knows this. What's the motive? There is none. There's no motive. You can't have a crime without a motive. I find it odd that we know this very elementary step, but others do not. Witness statements. Witness statements in the police reports that show texts being done. David's father mentioned at one point that he sent a couple texts to David that he never responded to. Sent some texts to David wondering how he's doing. That's fine. Fair enough. I'm sure any parent would send texts. But when we received the AT&T cell phone records of David's phone, he had two. One number, then he cut it off, shut down the account, went to another account. Two accounts. If anyone's texting David, they're going to be on the text section of that report on his cell phone records. Every single text, every text is logged. Now, we were assuming that the Apple Valley Police Department detective and team of detectives, once this AT&T phone records came in, were going to go through the process of double-checking, cross-checking, cross-footing, as we call in accounting, and making sure it ties, to reconcile it. Are the witness statements correct? The witness statements cannot be taken with a grain of salt. The Apple Valley Police Department took the witness statements as fact. Kenneth Mains took the witness statements as fact. No, number one. You get the phone records, you look back to the date that they said the text was sent, and you confirm the text was made. Now, on an easy, simple case, do you have to go into this detail? No. Do you have to go into this extra layer of detail, down to this next tier of detail? No. But in a case like this, a high-end case, I'm going to call it, one that there's several justice pages on Facebook solely regarded to this case, a private detective gets hired to look into this case because of the anomalies. This is now the time in your career that you go that extra mile. You've got to crisscross and tie everything out. David's father's texts never came in on David's cell phone. Right? Fact. Not an opinion. Not an opinion. Fact. David's father was lying to police. Why? Your next question should be, why? Why is that? David's brother and a couple acquaintances on the Gray State Project team also said that we sent texts to David, wondering about his well-being, acting like the concerned, buddy. Those did not come back. Those are not legit. Those were never made. Those texts did not come through. Why are witnesses lying to police? I think that's a very fair question. I don't believe Kenneth Mains cross-checked the texts with the dates and the times that they said the text came through with the very easy-to-read cell phone records and just ticked and tied to make sure that they happened. Chris Peck allegedly sold David Crowley a bag of weed on his last meeting with him before their family's demise. When police asked, how did you communicate? How did you communicate with David? He said, oh, it was all done by texting. David sent him a text that says, do you have any? Do you have any? Chris says, yes, swing on by. It was the last day of school for Rania before the Christmas break. David allegedly showed up with Comel, his wife, picked up a bag of weed. Cell phone records don't show any of those texts taking place. Now we find weed at the house on the dresser. It's common knowledge that David and Comel recreationally used weed. I've got no problem with that. Now, if the detectives didn't look into to ensure that, number one, David Crowley did ask for some weed on December 19th, I believe is what it was, they don't tie out. Kenneth Mains did not look at the cell phone records to tie out if this drug deal text even ever took place. So they needed to paint David Crowley as a discredited guy, a conspiracy theorist, a gun enthusiast, a drug user, kind of office rocker, kind of a batshit crazy guy. And that's what everyone fed police. Things that help support that. Now, police ate it up with a spoon. They were spoon-fed everything, meaning this guy did do it. Close it up, shut the book, case over. The reason we're here is because these things are not true. The reason we're here on a case that doesn't involve any of us is not here because we've got nothing better to do. It's some sort of hobby of ours, something we enjoy doing. It's frankly disgusting, the fact that we have to do this to make people wake up, smell the roses, and see what's really going on here, i.e., Apple Valley police detectives. I don't think they looked into any of this. Now, Ken Mains, highest of the high, as far as elite level of detective for cold cases, I don't think it ever crossed his mind to check the texts. That's just a fact. I don't think it. I don't think he did. I was waiting for him to email me back and say, Dan, we got a whole world of problems here. None of the texts jive. Handful of people are lying to police. That email never came. Never came. And I'm not making this up. The magic bullet. Kenneth Mains said in his video, I repeat, I quote, police go in, find 6 shell casings, 6 bullets, bullet fragments, 3 people dead, everything's accounted for, problem solved. While that statement ultimately becomes true, it wasn't true to begin with. January 18th, police left with 4 bullet fragments and 6 bullet casings. Doesn't tie. The math doesn't add up. They left, they took away the crime scene, called in the cleaners, case done. All we got left to do now is detective paperwork back at the office. Nothing at the case. There was yellow crime scene tape around that house less than 48 hours and was open. They had 4 fragments and 6 bullet casings. Now, the magic bullet. Kenneth Mains says that the bullet that killed David had his DNA on it. It was collected, problem solved. Well, that also is not entirely true. The bullet that they found, allegedly that killed David, and keep in mind these are mushroom bullets. These are hollow point bullets that mushroom out. going through your head or skull are going to collect brain matter, blood, tissue, bone, a whole variety of things on these nasty headshots using a .40 caliber weapon using hollow points. The bullet recovered the next month, mind you, the next month, only had David's touch DNA or nuclear DNA. His DNA, but touch DNA. Could have been him loading the cartridge. It could have been him. Those are all his bullets, his weapons. His touch DNA was probably on everything. Now, David and Kamel and their buddies typically still went to the same gun range, the shooting range, out in the country in Minnesota. They fired their .40 calibers. There was spent bullet fragments probably in the hundreds in that area. Anyone could have just picked up a fragment or two, dropped it in, and planted it in the attic. Now, let's stick to the facts. On the 18th, the bodies were recovered and taken out. On the 19th, January 19th, a 911 call comes in from the neighbors of Crowley's because of some disturbance, some loud noises, and some weird things going on at the house with a bunch of guys. Enough to call 911. I'm guessing one of those noises was a gunshot into the ceiling. I don't know. I'm guessing. When asked about the 911 call and what they were doing, the 4 or 5 gentlemen that were there said that they were in the attic. And they said they couldn't believe that police missed the hole in the ceiling. My first question, I'm assuming the detectives for Apple Valley's first question, and Kenneth Mains, certainly his first question would be, how do you know what the detectives saw or didn't see? These guys on the Gray State Project came onto social media on the 20th. They said, I can't believe police missed the bullet in the ceiling. I can't believe how they could have overlooked a ceiling bullet. The 3 bodies were found in the living room, a few feet away in the entranceway to the house. Straight up in an 8-foot ceiling was a hole, a bullet hole, that police missed. We thought at first that maybe the bullet hole was there and they just didn't get a photo of it. There are no photos of the crime scene showing a bullet. No bullet hole in the ceiling. Remember, that's the shot that killed David. So they left. The yellow crime scene tape went away. They didn't have the bullet, and they didn't know the ceiling hole existed. I'm guessing that the ceiling hole didn't exist until the 19th, when the ruckus took place, enough so that neighbors called 911. Now, the killers, in this case, were sloppy and made many mistakes. The mistakes is what I was hoping that Kenneth Mains would come back on, and his antenna would be raised up by saying some of this stuff doesn't make sense. The staging of the crime was sloppy. Kenneth Mains made the statement that the staging was so good, or almost too good. There's mistakes you wouldn't make when staging the scene. Well, they're smart enough to know that the fragments didn't tie out to the bullets and the holes didn't tie out to the final death of David, requiring the group to go back in again to make sure it happened. And they had to do that on the 19th under the auspices of cleaning up some things for Kamel by getting some of her things because her family lived in Texas. Well, the gunshot hole wasn't there until the 19th. And whether that bullet was legit or not, that was found in the attic, that's item number 57, it did have David's DNA on it. Was it the bullet that killed him? No, it couldn't have been. It could not have been the bullet that killed him. But a bullet with his touch DNA Who knows where that came from, and who knows how it even got there, if it was planted, what the deal was. All I know, their words, not mine, the individuals said that they were in the attic. This is in the police report. This is not the section that I had to give back and kind of point Kenneth Mains in the right direction to say, I would look at this section a little harder. I did this later, after he already came back and said, I believe the police story. This was in the 94-page police report that the Apple Valley policemen said that the kids were in the attic on the 19th, disturbing a crime scene. Now, the next day, the 20th, a cleaning crew was there cleaning the house. Vacuuming, cleaning up blood. And out of the living room rug, a bullet fragment falls free. They call police. They arrive and find out, yep, this is a bullet slug. This is a fragment, another hollow point that we didn't find the first day. This is the 6th one now. 6 casings, 4 bullets found on the scene when they closed the scene. 1 found on the 19th. Sorry, 1 found on the 20th from the cleaners. And the magic bullet that was put up there on the 19th of January wasn't found until February 16th, when police finally interview Chris Klein, that said he was in the attic. And he, too, said to police they couldn't believe that detectives did not see the hole in the ceiling. This is the first time police ever hear the phrase, I can't believe they didn't see the hole in the ceiling. They go on out there again. 3rd time to the scene. Look up, see the hole in the ceiling. Get a ladder, go up to the attic and find the infamous item number 57. I call it the magic bullet. It's more preposterous than the JFK assassination. You can't even make this stuff up. So the bullet that killed David was not the bullet found in the attic, but item 57 was a bullet fragment they found in the attic that had David's touch DNA. Touch. Skin. Touching it. Holding it. Manipulating it. No blood. No tissue. No brain matter. No bone. Should have been a lot of stuff on that bullet. David's bullet, it's my belief, once again, now this is an opinion, is that was kept as a trophy, once again, like these photos on the smartphone. Someone's got that. Someone's got the bullet that killed him. Police don't have it. Someone's got it. It may have been disposed of now because it's 8 years later, but they kept it. And the reason that one of them kept it, because there was multiple people in the house, is the reason that once it got back that they kept it was the reason they needed to go back and re-enter the house to make sure they put one up there and to create the hole. Now, Kenneth Mains, I don't want to be holding your hand through this whole process of guiding you through this. That was already done. We already gave you all the information. A bullet found there a month later, number one, let's say, for instance, David did not die. Let's say his wife and child were shot and killed. David doesn't die. This thing goes to court, gets brought before a jury with David in the hot seat. They'd have to throw out that bullet number 5 they found, and have to throw out bullet number 6 they found, which was the bullet that allegedly almost killed him, because neither one of those would be admissible to court because the chain of custody were broken. The crime scene was contaminated. Those things would be thrown out. You can't blame David for a bullet that was found a month later. Anyone knows it. That's inadmissible in court. Something that's been tampered with like that. So you couldn't get him on any other murder charge or attempted murder charge because the evidence isn't there. Now, dog was scavenging. Kenneth Mains believed that, like the Apple Valley police, the dog scavenged, was hungry, was eating and feasting on the bodies after not eating for 3 weeks. Well, be that as it may, we have a question. We have one question. The 5-year-old daughter, Rania, her arm was missing. Her arm was missing, not eaten, not partially gone gone from the shoulder, removed from the socket. I'll repeat that again. Removed from the socket, pulled, yanked, jarred loose from the socket. Not eaten. The dog's not going to be able to get in there with those tendons and muscles to rip it away from the socket. I could have eaten the arm, but not removed it from the socket. That's the thing where your antenna, once again, should be going off, Apple Valley Police Detectives. Lead Detective Gummert. Investigator Kenneth Mains. Where's the arm? The dog didn't do it. The dog didn't eat it. The dog could have eaten the skin, the muscles, but not a child's forearm and the upper arm. Gone. Not found at the scene. Not chewed up. Not found in feces. It was missing. Was her arm another trophy taken away by the killers? I don't know. There's no facts that tell me that the dog ate the arm. Where's the arm? How did it get removed? Who took the arm? Why is it gone? Why do all these trophies of the crime scene seem to be missing? One thing that Kenneth Mains did say was that I find it interesting that Rania, arm missing, broken rib at the in her armpit area, was a fractured rib. He came back to me and said, I find that odd. So I was waiting. I was waiting for the response. Yes, and what are you going to do about it? What's the next steps? Nothing. He just said, I found that was odd. Crickets. I found that was odd. Well, yes, we all found that as odd. Anyone could find that as odd. Your job as a detective is to say, why was it odd? How was it explained? Why was a 5-year-old girl's rib broken? Was she punched? I don't know. I can't imagine punching someone in the armpit. Was a foot used there as leverage to yank that arm out of the socket after the body was already dead? Possibly while the body was still alive? I can't explain it. I don't know. The fact is she had a broken, fractured rib, and the fact is her arm was missing. Fact, her arm was not found, not recovered from the scene. Where's her arm? Why are Kamel's 2 hands missing? Why is Rania's entire arm missing? And why is one of David's hands missing? His left hand missing. Gone. Not recovered. Not eaten up and chewed up. Bones not found in the feces. Missing. So those are the types of things that I was waiting for Kenneth Mains to come back and say, you know what, this is really odd, this is disturbing, I don't understand this, I don't get this, but you know what? I'm going to sit down for the next 2 weeks and I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to find it. Hired me to find the answers. I'm going to find it. He just said no. I found it was odd. That's when I started piecing together Mr. Kenneth Mains. He sounded like the Apple Valley Police Detectives. Yes, it was strange. His arm, her rib was fractured. Yes. Well, you're detectives. Lead Detective Gummert, what did you do when you found out the rib was fractured? Which one of your detectives did you assign to say, you know what, look into this further? Do a deep dive. Do some checking. Why is a girl's rib fractured and her arm's missing in the armpit area? Now, we know that David had a movie deal signed. We've got the evidence. I've sent the actual video of me doing the interview with MEG, the Mikes, Michael Entertainment Group, the Mike Entertainment Group, MEG. I interview the president of Michael Entertainment Group. He says we had a deal with David Crowley. Didn't say the specifics, didn't say 30 million. We had a deal. It was an oral agreement. We were moving towards completing it. David was a happy guy. He was on cloud 9. All of his dreams had come true. So that now is fact. I'm not pulling it out of the air. We're not making assumptions here. He had a deal. Now, Danny August Mason was not included in that deal. Neither was his business partner, Mitch Heil. They wanted to write them out on a legal agreement to move forward with the film, the movie, the TV series, the web series, what have you. Mitch Heil signed the paperwork and says, good luck with everything you're doing. I can't wait to see it. Danny August Mason said, no, I'm not going to sign it. I refuse to sign it. I'm not going to sign it at all. $30 million project, you're writing me out of it? Not so fast. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sign it over. He was vested in the business. He was the co-creator, the co-founder. But what did Danny August Mason say to police when asked, how are you connected to the gray state? He said, officer, I'm nothing but an actor. I'm just hired as an actor. Do whatever David says. I'm not involved in a business capacity at all. Lie, lie, lie. Now, we see this in the 94-page report the police did, the very first thing we had received a year after the incident. That Danny August Mason told police he's on record saying he's nothing more than an actor in the film. We also see business documents that show that he's a co-creator, co-founder, and heavily vested in this partnership on a business deal. Do the detectives ever look into Danny August Mason? Do the detectives ever do a deep dive into why he made that comment? Does Kenneth Mains raise his antenna and say, why would he lie to police? We've got a half a dozen people on record lying to police already in this case. I'm not exaggerating, half dozen. That's the question. Why all the lies? You can't have lies in a normal police investigation. You shouldn't have lies at all. Here we have blatant lies that no one follows up on. Detectives don't follow up on. Kenneth Mains didn't even determine them to be noteworthy. Now we're getting our motive. The one thing we're missing is the motive. If the script is worth $30 million, and David's dead, trying to cut those closest to him out of the project, but the Gray State guys are heavily vested in the project, who has motive to want David dead? Big motive, money motive, dollar motive, career motive. There's your motive. But Kenneth Mains seems to think that our group thinks there's a vast conspiracy, a police cover-up, and black ops from the CIA went in and killed this guy, is what we think. I've never told him that once. Is there a conspiracy? Yes. In the true definition of a conspiracy. A conspiracy is a crime involving two or more people. That's a conspiracy. The David Crowley case is, no doubt about it, a conspiracy. Two or more people involved in the commission of a crime. Now, for people doing the crime, they have to have the motive. They wanted that script. How do you get the script? Kill David? No, that doesn't do anything. Killing David doesn't give you the script. David owns the script. You kill David, or the government kills David, Kamel owns the script. Something happens to Kamel, the next remaining heir goes to Rania. Rania owns the script. Why do you think in this crime, remember now, we've got to think of it from the totality of the crime. Why were all three people dead? Why was the entire family dead? Why was all of the remaining heirs killed? I don't believe, honestly, I don't believe that the Apple Valley Police Department ever went down that road. I honestly believe Kenneth Mains has never even thought of that. I don't think it even entered his head. You want someone dead, you kill the person. If they're anti-government, you kill the person. If they're stealing from you and moving the script and writing you out of the script, you kill the person. Worst case scenario, of course. Never do you ever kill the family. Never. Unless it comes down to an asset that's going to roll to the next remaining heir. Now, Kenneth Mains knows this, obviously. He does cold cases. Why else did those guys want the script? David wasn't going to give it to him. In fact, he was cutting him out of it. Danny August Mason lied to police. David Crowley gave Danny August Mason a deadline of December 16th to sign his legal agreement. A deadline. He wouldn't do it. He refused to do it. But if you ask Danny August Mason, I was texting him, I was stopping over at the house, I was hanging out with David, we were good buddies. No, none of that's true. You were not good buddies at all. So this is one of the things I consider more of a slam dunk. $30 million script that many people put many years, 4 years of their life to do this, and they find out now that they're not going to be part of it. David Crowley goes on Facebook and says, I'm going to rebuild a new trustworthy team and take this project to fruition and complete it. That's a shot across the bow right there. Any detective knows that. Kenneth Mains knows that. The Apple Valley police detectives know that. That's across the shot across the bow. Why do you think that was the Facebook post deleted when they tried to pin it on David isolating himself? He was getting thin. He grew a mohawk. He was disheveled. All these things. They're all lies. None of those are true. Everyone who made the statement said David was getting thin, losing weight, and was disheveled. David was working out. He was keeping up on all of his fitness. His wife's a dietitian, eating healthy. He wasn't disheveled. Let it sink in. He wasn't disheveled. He never was. So who got the script? David dies, Carmel dies, Rania dies. The script now falls conveniently into Dan Crowley Sr. and Dan Crowley Jr. David's brother, who he didn't get along with and didn't talk to since August because of a big blowout. His father, who he hadn't communicated since, I don't think, August or September timeframe, and who lived 45 minutes away. Both are very interested in the big bucks. And they were both, neither of them were going to be involved in the big bucks, only David was. So they get the script, it falls into their hands, and who do they send it off to but Danny August Mason? May 5th, 2015, Danny August Mason hires a lawyer, a patent attorney lawyer, to get a new trademark and creates a new company with the state of Minnesota Secretary of State called Gray State Universe, LLC. We've done our homework. They were going to take the script, start a new company, and push it out there, push it forward. Forget David, we'll take it and we'll do it ourselves. They're not that bright. So we exposed each of the plans. What happened, what they did. It doesn't take much to put A plus B plus C plus D together, right? It's not a leap of faith to put the facts together. All these things I mentioned are facts. Facts. We've got it on the timeline. We've got it on the timeline. Now, for the guys not making money for 4 years, unemployed guys, most of them with criminal records, peppered criminal records, looking to make cash. Not only do they want the script, but what's in it for me? What's in it for me? How do you pay a hitman? What's the going rate for a hitman? How do you hire an assassin? I think these guys, more than likely, this is my opinion, said, hey, we'll just do it ourselves, give us some cash. October 18th, 2014, a $50,000 amount was taken out of a bank, removed, withdrawn, not a check, cash from a teller was withdrawn from Dan Crowley's account. Dan Crowley, the dad, David Crowley's dad. Strange? I don't know, maybe. Was it a mistake? Was it to cover a bill and they put money in the next day, a transfer in the accounts? No, there was a withdrawal made. There was a transfer made later to cover it up, but a deposit was never put back in. $50,000, in other words, is unexplained. Does it relate to this crime? I don't know. That's the job of the detectives. I don't know. Detectives, more than likely, are going to see a $50,000 cash withdrawal 2 months before a murder of 3. And I'm guessing lead detective Gummert probably said to one of his detectives, check it out. Do a deep dive. Overturn all those stones. We want to see what was behind this. Talk to them. Interview them. What was the money for? I don't think they did it. I don't think Kenneth Mains did it. $50,000, triple homicide. What's the going rate for killing a person? 10, 15, 20,000 each? 30,000? Maybe a child's less. I don't know. Maybe David's more. It fits. It fits. Guess who withdrew it? Dan Crowley Jr., the brother. Why would he be withdrawing $50,000 of cash just months before his brother was brutally murdered? His brother that he didn't get along with, his brother that he didn't talk to, hadn't been speaking to since August. The bank account it came out of is a POD bank account, a trust fund, essentially. It's payable upon death, payable upon deceased of the owner. The owner of the bank account, these are all in the records, by the way. We're not making this up, not pulling this out of thin air. The bank account owner is Dan Crowley Sr. It's a trust account for his kids. If you look into that account, which was also in the bank records, Wells Fargo in particular, his trust account, he was divorced, by the way, not remarried, but divorced from David's mother. He named 3 people as beneficiaries on his account. His daughter, Allison, his son, David, and his other son, Dan Jr., Dan Crowley Jr. 3 were the trustees. When and if Dan Sr. dies, the balance in that account would roll over to the 3. I don't know how they'd split it up. I don't know what the will is, what the will says. Dan Crowley Sr. is still alive, so it's a moot point. On average, there's $300,000 in there on the months that I looked in that account. A payable on death account is the owner's account only. Dan Sr., his account. The children, who are the beneficiaries, only become beneficiaries and only have access to that bank account and the dollars in it when the account holder dies. Dan Crowley did not die. Why is Dan Jr. pulling money out of that account in cash? Well, maybe he didn't. Maybe Dan did. Maybe the dad, Dan Sr. Dan Sr. tells police, and I believe he's being truthful this time. He says, I was out of the country on business in Germany for most of October 2014. Most of October 2014. So I'm guessing most is 3 to 4 weeks, 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks. Out of the country for 3 weeks. In Germany. The withdrawal slip was handwritten from a Minneapolis or St. Paul, Minnesota branch location of Wells Fargo in the location, in the U.S. Who withdrew it? So a detective, an elementary detective, an elementary version of Kenneth Mains already knows we've got a fraud issue here. We've got a fraud case. Potential fraud. Someone accessing funds that shouldn't be. The withdrawal slip says Dan Crowley. Dan Crowley Sr. That's the owner of the account, is Dan Crowley Sr. Dan Crowley Sr. was out of the country in Germany. Couldn't have been the one making the withdrawal. Must have been his son forging it. Now you can come to any conclusion you want. You can come to any supposition you want, any opinion you want. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. All I know is the facts. That's Dan Sr.'s account. Dan Sr. didn't make the withdrawal. The withdrawal happened in the middle of the month. Maybe a different story if it happened on the 1st or 2nd or 3rd of October. Maybe the 30th, 31st, when he got back. Smack dab in the middle of the month is October. Dan himself, his words, tells police he was in Germany. So now we got a problem. We've got a problem. I think I would have sat down with an hour or two with each Crowley, Dan Sr. and Jr. in an interview room if I was a detective and got to the bottom of this $50,000 withdrawal. It certainly wasn't on the up and up. It certainly wasn't legit. If it's not legit, it's fraud. Forget the triple murders, forget the triple homicide. Wouldn't the Apple Valley Police Department now be going to this family under the auspices of fraud charges? Now, they may not. Family's been through enough, 3 dead. We don't want to inconvenience them with more issues. I'm not going to charge the brother with fraud. But it is. Maybe this would all help tie together the big picture. The totality of this event, if you start piecing the breadcrumbs together. Apple Valley Police had it in their head that David did this. They're not going to look at the money. They're not going to look at a $50,000 withdrawal. That's going to be setting off red flags in the IRS and in the banking community altogether. I'm sure that when the withdrawal happened, Dan Sr. in Germany got a notification. That's how banks work. Dan Jr. did the withdrawal, forged his name, and got the money out without even knowing his father would notice. We're not dealing with bright people here. Those two, father and son, probably had an interesting conversation. But because of the death and the involvement of the script and everything else that took place, they probably have an understanding to just let it go. This isn't rocket scientists, folks. It's not rocket scientists. Not a rocket science. The last thing that Kenneth Mains says is that you see 3 dead bodies, you see some footprints, you see bloody footprints. You know the blood, it's already been tested, it's Comel's blood. What adults are not wearing socks? David's not wearing socks. David left the footprints. No one entered the house, no one exited the house. There's no broken entry, no forced entry. Patio door slider, 1/4 inch open. He didn't have an issue with that, even though he lives in Pennsylvania. Minnesota, no, not January. Your back slider door is not open in January in Minnesota. Never. There's no reason for that. Whose footprint is it? Does it appear to be David's? From an elementary detective taking a Detective 101 class? Yes, it's got to be his. He was barefoot. There was blood. The blood's not him. And there's a bloody footprint. And there was no forced entry. It's almost like I think that the detectives in this case go through a little checklist of 20 or 30 things to check. Check, 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 check. Did it ever cross their mind that maybe it's not a footprint at all? My question is this: is it a footprint? I don't know. Looks like a footprint. Bloody, looks like a footprint. I guess the first thing I would do, check David's feet. You already know he's barefoot. Are there blood on his feet? Was testing done on David's bare feet to confirm that there was blood on his feet? I have nothing to support that any test was that was done. I heard nothing back from Kenneth Mains asking why wasn't his feet tested for blood. Do we know it's his footprint? What he said on his video was who else would be in the house leaving footprints behind? It had to be David. It was said in a very condescending tone. Let's leave it at that. Very condescending. Of course it's David's. Who else would it be? Kenneth, is it a footprint? Looks like a footprint. To me, it looks like a handmade marking on the floor to make it look like a man's foot. Has that ever crossed your mind? Has that even entered your head in the realm of possibility? Now, with all this going on, and someone was barefoot with all the blood, there would be footprints throughout the house, on the carpeting, on the hardwood floors, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the living room, on the floor. Footprints everywhere. There was only one footprint, maybe two, in the kitchen by the island that looked like a child made it in art class. There's entire videos on YouTube showing how this footprint could have been made to look like a footprint. Staged, once again. But the problem is here, the detectives assume it's David's foot. By looking to see who's dead in the house, or who was in the house that was not wearing socks. Easy. You deduce it's David. No socks. It's not a child's footprint. It's an adult man's. It has to be his. The fair question to ask is, was the blood tested? Was there blood on his foot? Kenneth Mains seems to think that was an absurd question to begin with. Absurd. I watched the video. I think it's a very fair question. How else would you define, how else would you deduce whose footprint that was? You go to the foot of the man that's barefoot, test it for blood. Well, they may say, what if the dog licked it off? No blood. There would still be some remnants, residue, blood on the foot. I'm guessing if the testing on the foot took place, there would be no blood on it. Right? That's not a leap. If David didn't do the killing, David didn't write on the wall, David didn't say the forgiveness prayer, David didn't write the note on the laptop, if David didn't do any of this, more than likely, David wasn't walking around barefoot in blood. That's not much of a stretch there. Not much of a leap. The footprint to me looks fake. There's only two footprints there. Now we know the blood on the wall is Kamel's. That was tested. It was her blood. Right? We know that. How did it get there? Well, someone wrote it. Who? The detectives and Kenneth Mains say the only male there was David. It couldn't have been Kamel because she's dead by using the process of deduction. Rania is only 5 years old. She couldn't have written Allah Akbar. You deduce back to David. David wrote it. Our question, Kenneth, is this. Who wrote it? So you look for who? Fingerprints. Whose fingerprints are on that wall? There's none. There's no fingerprints. Well, certainly there must be fingerprints on the wall if someone's writing on the wall. At least at the beginning or at the end when they lift off or the beginning when they push down. In the middle of the words, I highly doubt there's going to be a fingerprint. Leads me to believe someone using gloves, latex gloves, did the writing on the wall. Now, an interesting thing to point out in Kenneth Mains' video is that he thought we were supposed to be doing some kind of handwriting analysis. Now, we get the fact that handwriting analysis is done on paper, letters, on written things. You can't do handwriting analysis on the wall with big block letters. We never said that, Kenneth. No one said that. But if you look at the gifts and the packages on the front steps, in other words, looking at all the photos, there's only one person that writes in all capitals. And I'm guessing that same person wrote the blood in all capitals on the wall. We know it wasn't David. Dan Crowley Jr. writes in all capitals. Wouldn't he be the first one you go to? You can't do analysis. You can't do a handwriting analysis for blood on the wall. Like Kenneth said in his report, it's something you don't do. You compare handwriting to handwriting. Known samples to exhibits. You can't do a handwriting analysis on the wall. No one in our group suggested you do a handwriting analysis. But who writes like that? David never writes in all caps. Dan Jr. writes only in all caps. Wouldn't he be the person you're going to talk to or question? Obviously, someone was wearing gloves when they did this. So, these are the questions that we wanted you to think about. These are the questions, Kenneth, that we wanted you to explore. These were the stones we wanted you to overturn. The common sense answers that we wanted you to research in this. I could have given this assignment to any detective, any private investigator, if they're just going to read the police reports and come back and say, I agree with them, everything looks good. There's tons of anomalies in that police report. You came to me with one. Rania has a broken rib. I thought that was odd. I was literally waiting for a list of 15 bullet points to say this whole case doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. Now, I'll leave you with this. David's right-handed. The gun was found by his left hand. His left hand was there. His right hand was missing. His right hand was missing. And I don't mean chewed off by the dog. Who fired the gun? Who fired the gun? So, I don't care if the gun was laying 2 inches from the hand, 1 foot from the hand, if the knife was open in a locked position, facing. We were collecting questions from other people in the group. I asked all 5 of us in the group, submit 5 questions. I think we each gave 5. We submitted them in. Most of those weren't even my questions, but they're questions nonetheless. They're questions that people had. They're questions that you could have addressed. Your video really purported that this was a waste of your time, almost child play, almost foolish to be asking these stupid questions. Well, they're questions nonetheless. I think a handgun found by the left side of a person who's right-handed, whose right hand is missing, and the gun is there, and you imply that the dog moved it, I don't want to laugh, but I have to laugh. The dog didn't move the gun. The dog didn't move the firearm to the left side. Sloppy staging. Sloppy staging. So anyway, if you want to look it up, here's Ken's page. He's out there on, I've done some really good stuff. Actually, some of his reporting is very good. I would, in cold cases, I think he'd be a great guy to hire. Yeah, in a cold case. This is not a cold case. He was just basically hired as a consultant to just review the work. He reviewed the work. For some reason, he put together this video and released it on the 30th. I'm not sure what brought that up, but this is just a response. This is just a, saying there's big points here. There's big pieces of this case, important pieces of this case. Number one, the killers of David Crowley, his wife, and his 5-year-old daughter are on the loose. That doesn't leave me sitting too well. If you don't even have the bullet that killed David, you've got to reopen the case and look into this. And I'm talking a fine-tooth comb. Not just flipping through pages in a police report, regurgitating back to me what you think happened by a process of deduction. I'm talking critical thinking. Critical thinking. My name is Dan Hennen. Today is January 6, 2023. Feel free to share this, and thanks for listening.